EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen. John, how you doing on this Tuesday morning, brother, middle of June?
Middle of June. It would be nice if the sun would come out in June.
Yeah,
I think
man,
it's supposed to, but locally, for those local, we have a lot of international listeners as well. So welcome into them. But locally here, it's been just dreadful.
Yeah,
Dreadful.
muggy and cloudy and windy and nothing great, Johnny, back here in this early part of the June. But we will see how the weather turns for us all. Hopefully, we got a good July ahead weather-wise. Eagles will be back to camp. Remember, they report everybody July 22nd. And they're on the field July 23rd. So we'll be following you guys, taking you guys all the way up to that point. We got a great show planned today for you guys. We appreciate everybody being here this morning. Already got a good crowd in the chat. We appreciate each and everybody watching today. If you're listening on the podcast as well, got to give a shout out to all of you people. Our podcast numbers have been crushing it, growing at a faster clip than anywhere. So thank you all for listening to the podcast version of Birds 365. We appreciate that. Johnny Mac, today I want to start on an Eagles legend that I believe will end up in Canton, and that's Lane Johnson. Did you hear his comment about he thinks he is not yet at his peak? Almost there, Johnny Mac.
Yeah. I was there.
Right.
Yeah, I was there when he said that, which is kind of amazing at 35. But he's intimated that a couple of times in the past. He's gotten smarter. He admits he's not as good as an athlete. He's one of the best athletes ever at the offensive line position when he was younger. And you can go back to his history. I mean, he was a quarterback in high school and, eventually moved to tight end, then became a right tackle. Left tackle, sorry. People forget he was drafted to be the heir apparent to Jason Peters, which is amazing. And then he got so good at right tackle. Jeff Stoutland decided one day, we're not moving him because the game shifted. He's been around so long too. 2013, when he was the 4th overall pick, you can start there. A lot of good things happened. Chip Kelly wanted Deion Jordan. Luckily, Miami traded up ahead of the Eagles to get him, and the Eagles were stuck with Lane Johnson, and I use that facetiously. But, even if you go back to 2013, left tackles were more important than right tackles by a wide margin, not only from the way the game was played, but also from how they were rewarded. And that was the whole point of, you got to get a left tackle. You got to get a left tackle. And then you could kind of cobble it together on the other side. If you have a right-handed quarterback, which most people do, it would flip if you have a left-handed, the rare instance you have a left-handed quarterback. But then defenses started to change and it became more important to get to the quarterback at all costs. And, they started putting really good edge rushers on both sides and started to build that way. And the position became more and more important. So if you look early in Lane Johnson's career, you didn't see many all-pros. You didn't see his first all-pro came in 2017, which was Super Bowl 52. Even Pro Bowls. His first Pro Bowl was, I believe, 2017. I'd have to cross-check that. But right tackles didn't go. They didn't go. They took 2 left tackles. And that began to change. So even when you look at his overall sort of resume, I think he's at 5 All-Pros, which is pretty phenomenal. That's the most All-Pros since Bob Brown and Eagles lore. So it's still phenomenal, but it should be more. It should be more if they did it the right way and if they picked a right tackle and a left tackle. But they didn't do that. And the same thing goes with Pro Bowls, which is a little less important when you talk about Hall of Fame legacy. That's the reason I'm talking about it. So, long story short, he's already in my estimation. And I think, most of the voters are savvy enough to realize that what happened and why, early on in his career and how things have shifted. So yeah, he's already in. He's a Hall of Fame player. And the scary part is he's 35 and he's smarter and he's still holding up. And he's healthy. That's the biggest key. Because when he went through the 2 ankle surgeries, he was thinking about walking away.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's how bad it was. And the mistake was they tried to patch it together with what they call a tightrope surgery. And didn't work. And he was in a lot of pain. And eventually they shut him down. They had to scale back and do reconstructive surgery. And ever since then, he's felt good. And that can always change. And he admits that. It's a brutal game. But yeah, there's no evidence of him slowing down at 35 years old. And, last season was one of his best seasons. And I don't expect much slippage, if any, this season. Just a great player. Probably one of the best Eagles players of all time, but it's hard to get that kind of recognition when you're an offensive lineman. But that's what he is.
Yeah, I wonder how close he is to the top of the list as one of the best right tackles to ever grace a football field. I think 100% he's a Hall of Fame lock. And for those who say, is Lane Johnson better now than he ever was? Well, listen to his 2024 regular season stats. And John, I'm sure you have these as well. I think these are all correct, but I'd have to double check to make sure they're exactly what they were. 937 snaps, 0 sacks allowed, ranked first at the position, 1 quarterback hit allowed, 10 total pressures allowed on 451 pass block snaps, 6 penalties, tied for first fewest at the position, an 88.1 pass block grade, leading all right tackles, an 85.4 run blocking grade, and a 90.6 overall offensive grade, the highest grade of his career. That's pretty unbelievable, John, for that age player to dominate at that position like that, man. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, one of the things, the cruel irony of sports is you're at your height physically very early as
Right.
you're younger, but you're at your height from an understanding and savviness of the game later in your career. And Lane's been able to sort of balance that better than most because he was as I said, he is a tremendous athlete, but he acknowledges he's not the same athlete he was when he came in, but the savviness has made up for it. And he's gotten better and better and better. And I always bring up Tim Irwin, who played for like 17 years, and then he became an NFL agent. He wasn't nearly Lane Johnson, but he was a right tackle, and he played for a long time. And as he got older, he got better because he was just smart, savvy, knew when to hold. Yeah, even things like that, which
Right.
are, you get away with it. And reputation plays into it. All of it plays into it, but best right tackle in football.
No doubt about it. How close is he, John? You think he's in the conversation for the greatest of all time?
Well, that's a big conversation.
That's a big conversation. But I do think, Lane Johnson's level of dominance, again, I'm a younger fan. I'm not going to know the answer to this question. I don't have the benefit of having watched the guys who've come before him. But I don't know, man. This guy is a dominant football player.
Yeah, again, I don't, obviously, I tend to not try to compare him to like guys in the 70s because the game has changed so much.
Yeah, right.
So in his era, he's the best. And if you're in that conversation, that's all you need. That's all you should need at least. But as far as, it's completely different. You have to be more athletic. But for those people, and I always say the time machine's got to work both ways. So I don't like the people pointing out, well, he was a better athlete than somebody from the 70s, which is completely true. But somebody from the 70s had to sell insurance in the offseason and
Yeah.
wasn't getting paid, millions of dollars to where they can only concentrate on football, travel, the advancements in nutrition and medical. So I don't like to compare that. But in his era, he's the best right tackle, and that holds some weight. And there's some good ones. And Tristan Wirfs played right tackle, left tackle now, but Penei Sewell's obviously tremendous, but
Yeah.
Lane's been doing it for so long.
Trent Williams, I feel like it's Lane and Trent are the two top tier 1 level tackles that have been around recently, and just to go with the modern era.
Yeah, I mean Trent's a left tackle and has been a left
right.
tackle, and that's part of it because he is a left tackle, and most would put Trent ahead of him, but again, part of that is just the left versus right that he's gone through his entire career. But Trent Williams is one of the best offensive linemen ever, I would say. He's not quite that level, but he's right underneath it. And that's not a bad thing. That's not an insult.
No, it's not. It's not. They're both unbelievable players. I have them as the tier 1 guys from the modern. I know they are different, as John pointed out. Trent Williams is a left tackle. John, I guess the tough question with this would be, does the suspensions that Lane Johnson had for PEDs in 2016, and I think he had another one in 2014, a shorter one, did they impact at all his legacy? How do you see that, with a guy like a Hall of Fame voters or, I don't know. I mean, I think he's so dominant, he'll overcome that.
Yeah,
but I got to wonder if it has some impact.
Zero impact.
You
Zero.
think so? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
For whatever reason, and it is stupid, but I think football's got it right. Like, there's guys that have used PEDs, but we don't know who used, who didn't use, blah, blah, blah. And for many years, it was the wild, wild west in football, and everybody was using it. But so I think people have taken the right approach and said, well, we're going to put in the good players. And there's no baseball's mistake is they have this nebulous clause that they give to the voters that, basically it's a morality clause. So you got a bunch of guys with no morals acting like they're the gatekeeper for morals. So that's where I think major mistakes in baseball, which you should. And I've always said, for people that have listened to me on the radio long before this show existed, whether it's Pete Rose, Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, on down the line. For those reasons, I don't know. I don't know what they did. I don't know. More importantly, I don't know what the players did that were going against them. I always point out the Mitchell report in baseball. There's like 300 players named, and I'm whatever, and the vast majority of them stink. They didn't turn into Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens. So to gauge it, to believe, to have the hubris to believe is just stupid. So, and football has generally been, and the fan bases as well, for whatever reason, fans make a bigger deal out of baseball players that do PEDs than football players. I don't know why, but in football, it's almost accepted. They've done a good job. It's not as prevalent as it once was, but do the math when you get to be not a lot of normal people walking around at 320 pounds that can bench press 500 pounds. And that's all over the league, and it's been that way for a long time.
Yeah, I guess this is a hard question to quantify, but I got asked this yesterday about Lane Johnson and the running, and with obviously coming off of last year with Saquon Barkley. Who would the Eagles be able to prevail easier without, Lane Johnson or Saquon Barkley? To me, the answer was Lane Johnson because they did it without Saquon. Is it as simple as that for you too, or what do you think there?
Well, it's funny, because we're going to be doing our best 25 players, and there's a certain other entity that's doing some kind of goofy list because it's list season. Um, and the debates and Jalen this, Jalen that.
Oh yeah, I
And there's
saw that one.
some
Yeah, I saw that.
some
The
people
top
left them
100
off the
debate.
list. Some people have them number one. To me, it's all about definition. So you can have any definition you want, but I think people conflate, like when Ed and I do it. My definition, which I've said multiple times on this show, is who does their job the best. That's my definition of best pure football players. Because guess what? At quarterback, and the Eagles have a very good quarterback. But at quarterback, if you have a very bad quarterback, he's still the most impactful player on your team. So
Right.
if God forbid Jalen Hurts gets injured, the next day, the most important player on the Philadelphia Eagles is Tanner McKee. Period. End of sentence. But I can say at that point, when you don't have a great quarterback, you can say, well, he's the most important player because of the impact of the importance of the position, but you realize he's not the best player on the team. You can say that, and everybody goes, yeah, duh. But when you have a really good quarterback and you say, guess what? He's not the best player, the best football player on the team. And think about all the fucking players on this team.
That's what I mean. This team is in particular is a tough one. Is a different
Lane
conversation.
Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown. PFF just ranked A.J. Brown the best receiver in football. The best receiver in football, ahead of Jamar Chase and Justin
Yeah,
Jefferson.
but that was a guy on PFF, right? It wasn't
Yeah. Everybody's got their list, and if you
Right.
don't like it, just turn to the next one.
Exactly.
It'll have Chase, your favorite receiver, Jefferson, whatever. But he's in the conversation. They have so many good players. Jalen Carter, we haven't even met. They have so many. Quinyon Mitchell early in his career, Cooper DeJean early in his career. Think about it. I think if you think about it, if you define it correctly, you understand. All right, who are the best pure football players on this team? And to me, it starts with AJ and Lane, and you can argue back and forth. And last season, if you're just going last season, because a lot of people will say Saquon, and that's fine. He's phenomenal. Jordan Mailata had the best season of any offensive player. But if you want to use some consistency and longevity, it's AJ and Lane, and you can debate back and forth. But there's so many good players on this team, and I think if you say if you look at it that way and say, well, does Lane Johnson do his job better than insert name? Yeah, probably. Does AJ Brown do his job better than insert name? Probably. Saquon's in that category. Jordan's in that category. Jalen's getting to that category. Jalen Carter is getting to that category. There's so many good players on this team.
I can't wait to see your top 25 list. I feel like there's so many names that could make that top 10. I mean, how do you do it, John? Do you do it a full career, or like will you do it based on the 24 season?
No, impact. To me, it's the moment. It's the best 25 players on the 2025 Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
So,
Like, I wonder where Cooper and Quinyon will be, because I think they both did their jobs pretty well last year.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard, you know what I mean? It's harder to
But
gauge
I mean,
that
it bleeds.
first year.
It bleeds over a little bit because when you have somebody like who's done it for as long as Lane, is he going to get more deference than Quinyon and Cooper? Yeah, of course. And even Zach Bond for that. I didn't mention Zach. There's so many good players on this team. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
However, it is. I started because we're going to start it soon. I think June 20th, but I started putting it together, and I will say it's tougher to get to 25 than it has been. So they've suffered some attrition,
Right.
but it's still an amazingly talented team at the top of the roster. And that's preparing you because people are going to be upset. But I think if you look at it logically, You know, people are going to be upset where the quarterback is on my list. But I think if you look at it logically and if you're honest with yourself, well, how do you put him ahead of Lane Johnson? How do you put him ahead of Saquon Barkley? How do you put him ahead of Jordan Mailata? How do you put him ahead of who did I miss?
It's like a pick your poison here, John, kind of.
It's like, give me a break, people.
Yeah.
You're completing impact of the position with the definition of the respective jobs.
Right.
And if you're now you can have a different definition. But I always say, I'm just telling you my definition. I'm not arguing other people's that. That's a waste of time.
But I like the way you do it. Who does their job the best? The one thing I would say is, and I'm not saying he's better than the guys you just named or did his job better than the guys you just named, but the one thing I did think about, like with Jalen, was would another team, John, who had a quarterback as good as Jalen, would they have went with what the offense did last year? Like, for example, if Joe Burrow had an offensive line and Saquon Barkley, they probably wouldn't build their offense like that. But if they were having that level of success running the football, would they allow it to happen like that, like the way Jalen Hurts did? I don't think they would.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't even get into that position because and that's, by the way, maybe you should. You know, that's probably a better question. You know, but your belief and part of it is when you have a player like that, like Joe Burrow, your belief is you don't have to do certain things. And maybe that's unfair to the quarterback. Maybe people should start thinking about, you know, building. I always say, you know, it's a copycat league and the Eagles have had tremendous success, but they copied the wrong things. They try to break off a piece here and there. No, what you should be doing is building up the offensive line, number one, to a ridiculous degree, and then filling in. And, you know, then the business part of it is you have to have, which might be the most difficult part of all, the business part of, you have to get an owner willing to spend cash in the immediacy and, you know, have voidable years on the back end of contracts and be able to build the roster in the moment. So I know you brought up Nicole Lynn and her describing Jalen when he got his contract, which is important. Don't get me wrong, but if you don't have an owner willing to set up the contract the way the Eagles set up the contract,
exactly.
it's a waste of time. You know, it's not like he's not getting the money; he's getting the money. But the Eagles are just willing to do this unique accounting at the expense of paying a bunch of money down the road when maybe it will affect them in certain seasons where they can't build the way they want to. But it's a give and take. It's basically, you know, kicking the can down the road with the credit card, basically.
But you pay the cash up front, right? Or a lot.
Yeah, the cash is up front. But I think a lot of people, when people say dead money, that money's already gone. Like that has no impact.
Well, that's why I don't love the credit card analogy. I hear it used a lot, but you got to pay a credit card. Like this is technically paid. It's just impacting your cap.
Yeah, it's not a perfect analogy, but
it's not like an actual bill. It's just
yeah. It's an analogy from the standpoint that you still have to pay for that bill as far as accounting.
Right.
So
right.
They're
off the cap.
It's not a perfect analogy because yes, you have to actually pay money, but
and
the money
don't miss your credit card payments, everybody.
And the money is paid up front here, but and that's another, like I remember we were talking about that with Mike Gill last week, and it was, you know, well, that's just this year. Like if they pay $16 million, everybody's going down to Jair Alexander. No, it's not. That's the whole point. Well, it is, and it's not. The whole point is, and it doesn't have an impact on 2026, but it does because the Eagles have spent more money over the past decade than any team in the NFL. That's why they're in the position. That's why they reset this offseason, because they want to restock the coffers so they can do it again with this second wave of great players. We just talked about some of the great. Where here comes Jalen Carter, here comes Nolan Smith, here comes Cooper, here comes Quinion.
Right.
They want to restock the copper so they're in a position to pay those guys. And that's why they reset and rebooted a little bit. So if you go out and pay $16 million after spending the whole offseason being disciplined, well, that's all up front. That's all coming today. Now, you can use the voidable years from a cap standpoint. That's why it's cash over cap. The cap's not the problem. The cash is the problem. And they don't want to pay that, especially when you have a Kaylee Ringo who you think has some upside and can be cost effective for 2 years if you get them out on the field this year.
Right. Makes sense on the cap. John, I want to close up on the Lane Johnson conversation. I just want to ask this because I know this is talked about a lot. Real Zeal checks in. He says Lane is a right tackle. So there are 32 left tackles that are assumed to be better than him. Now, I don't agree with that. But my question would be more so, how do you think it is viewed that he's not a left tackle? Do you think if you put him on the left side, how elite would he be? Like how do you gauge that conversation with a player like Lane who's dominated so much, but is the right tackle not the left tackle?
It isn't, but the gap is closed. That's what I was explaining before. Right. When he first got here at 2013, it still existed. Now, because of the change in defenses, really, and they put, so many of the best pass rushers are now on the left side, which is against the right tackle, the Von Millers of the world. All of a sudden, they flipped them over. Micah Parsons plays mainly on that side. There's a bunch of guys. Khalil Mack for a while played on that side. There's a bunch of guys. And used to be the weak side edge rusher was the guy. You put your best passer. Now a bunch of teams have two great edge rushers now, which didn't used to be the case. In the old days when you had real 3-4s and 4-3s, 4-3, you'd have a base left end. He was the run guy. He was the run support guy. And you had the weak side pass rusher who was over the left tackle. That's why left tackle for many years was valued more than right tackle. It still is to a certain degree, but it's a much, much lower gap. And as evidenced by, no offense, Real Zeal, but there ain't 32 left tackles in the NFL considered better than Lane Johnson. He was a second team All-Pro last year.
Which that means first team, but
and that's a good debate, but that means there's two guys considered better than him. That's it. And you're right. He probably should have been first team, but that's it. And he's been an All-Pro now, 2017, 2021, 22, 23, 24. So 4 consecutive years. He's been at least a second team All-Pro. Was first team in 2022. So no, that gap has changed dramatically, shifted dramatically. But again, if you go back to use Trent Williams as the example, let's look up Trent. I don't know how many All-Pros he's got, but
I think he's 3-time first team All-Pro. I think you'd have to tell me though. 3-time first team All-Pro. I'm not sure how many total All-Pros he has. I think he was an 11-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, he's 11-time Pro Bowler. Yeah, actually, Lane's got more All-Pros, so that tells you. But 11 times, not even close from a Pro Bowl.
You said Lane was what, 4 or 5?
Five, and he's got 4. But he's got 11 Pro Bowls, and Lane's got 6, which is a disparity that shouldn't exist. But again, early in his career, they wouldn't take, and Lane, that would piss Lane off to be honest, because they wouldn't take any right tackle. It would be 2 left tackles,
right? And
which is not
off.
Yeah, which was not which is not the way it should be. And a good thing, and my buddy Rob Motti is in charge of the AP All-Pro voting, and I get a vote, and we have to pick a left tackle and a right tackle. You know that shifted years ago. But again, it wasn't that way in 2013. I'm not sure when Rob changed it, but and for many Pro Bowl, it was even worse. They would just take all left tackles.
Yeah.
which is not fair. But that has changed. And part of the reason it's changed, and the biggest part, Lane Johnson. And to a lesser degree, but he paved the road. Now Panay Sewell, but Lane paved the road, paved the lane. To use the pun.
Paved the lane, nice. All right, good stuff. I wanted to give a segment to Lane Johnson because I feel like this dude is as appreciated as he is, John. It still sometimes feels like he's underappreciated. I mean, you look at the stats that he has. It's almost like one of those things where he's so good, you stop paying attention to it because you don't think about it. You don't worry about it. It's not something that comes up at all.
I say all the time, the biggest luxury for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I mean the biggest luxury on field for the Philadelphia Eagles for many years, really, and really most recently since Jordan took off, they do not help their tackles at all.
No.
And if you look around the NFL, half of the game planning is designed to help somebody on the offensive line. Because I always say, if you can't block people, you can't play offense. And the Eagles go into every game not worrying about their tackles. Every single game. They're the only team in the NFL that has that luxury.
It's amazing, man. Lane's a great story. Lane will be headed to the Hall of Fame. Jordan Mailata won't be far behind him. He'll play a lot longer than Lane plays. At least I presume he will play.
Yeah, George's got to play. George's not no doubt about it. But
not yet. But if he has another 3-4 years, like Lane Johnson at Jordan's age wasn't either. You mentioned it. His first big year was what, 2016? You said 2017.
2017. Well, not his first big year. His first recognized big year, I would say.
Right.
Not his first big year, personally. He was a very good player before that.
I think my George is headed right there too.
I don't know. Jordan's got a long way to go. Jordan was, by the way, Jordan was the best player in football. Jordan has a different hurdle to overcome. People don't believe his pedigree. He's got to overcome that. They don't believe the player he's turned into. It's such a weird thing. There's so many.
Yeah, it is.
He still to this day has never made a Pro Bowl, Jordan Mailata.
What?
He finally got over that hump as a second team All Pro this year, but he didn't make the Pro Bowl. Yeah, it's absurd.
Yeah, that is weird. See, that's the one thing where it's like, it is so interesting where we talk about these draft positions, and it really doesn't matter all that much for what happens in the career of a player, but there is little ramifications that
oh my God,
still exist and still pop up all the time. And this is a perfect example of Jordan Mailata is like damn near one of the best left tackles in football. Last year, I think he was the best left tackle in football.
He's the best offensive player in football, if you believe PFF. He's the best player in football, offense, defense. He was number one.
He didn't make the Pro Bowl last year?
Didn't make the Pro Bowl.
What? Who made the Pro Bowl?
Don't know.
Soon. Tristan
Lane Wirfs made it. There's a lot of good tackles. But
yeah, no, I'm not saying those other guys aren't great, but I feel like
Sewell certainly made it. So there's three guys right there. Sewell, Wirfs, Lane. I forget who the fourth one was, but so, a lot of tough competition. Those guys have the pedigree and the history. Yeah, it's very difficult to break through. And once you break through, then it comes. Then
you're Pro Bowl every year.
Yeah. Then there'll be back end years where you probably don't deserve to be in the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, right. With the seventh rounder, though, it's hard to get to that, to get over the.
Well, not only the seventh rounder, I think more important is his history in that, which we always talk about, his great history of showing up, not even understanding how to put on his helmet, to turning into the best left tackle in the NFL last season. I think there's people outside of Philadelphia who say, "Oh, he can't really be that good," but voters are just normal people, and they all have weird proclivity. It's
yes, they do. James M checks in. He says, nobody cares about the Pro Bowl. It's no longer relevant because it's a big popularity contest. Well, James, I do agree with that, but it clearly still is a factor in terms of like the way.
Factor in a bunch of things. Factor in contract incentives are based on Pro Bowls. Now, Hall of Fame voters will they pay much more importance to all pro nuts than Pro Bowls, but they still matter. Like if you're an 11-time Pro Bowl, oh, that matters. They pay attention to that. So yeah, and the worst part is the contract stuff because it means something to the players because of the contract.
And then they're attaching this dumb vanity thing where I do agree with James. It's become a popularity contest, but it actually has real ramifications.
Yeah. And it's always been, I don't know, popularity is the right way. I use more of, once you break through, once you're part of the club, you're part. Now, they conflated, now it's whatever. It's part fans, part coaching. They're not really above board with it. Part players voting. So you have this 3-pronged voting system. And yeah, they get a lot of shit wrong. No doubt about it.
Good stuff there, James. I appreciate it. Great segment there on Lane Johnson. He's headed to the Hall of Fame, everybody, eventually. But I just wanted to highlight that player. I thought the comment he made, for those who missed it, was basically that I feel like I'm getting close to my peak, which is pretty crazy to hear a 35-year-old football player say. But I believed it. I really believed it. And when you go and look at the numbers bear that out as well. For Lane Johnson. So great stuff there. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning already. We got one chat. Reed, we'll get to a commercial break. And when we come back, I want to talk Jordan Davis. All right. We're going to segment on Jordan Davis. We'll do top position groups, as Johnny Mack teased out yesterday, of a good list he would do. So we'll do that today in hour number 2. And then we'll do a little NFC East talk as well. All right. Where are the Commanders, Cowboys, Giants, and the Eagles as we get ready for the 2025 season? Remember, everybody, as good as we feel about the NFC East this year, there hasn't been a repeat winner since 2004 when the Eagles repeated then. So an uphill battle maybe for the Birds to repeat this year, but I think they break through. Let's go to our chat from Dakota Warren, member for 5 months. Dakota, thank you, brother. Appreciate it, man. I have been watching your post, man, laying concrete. Sometimes, Dakota, I live through you because, I sit here behind a computer screen all day, and I'm like, man, laying concrete sounds pretty fun right about now. Get out in the sun and lay some concrete. So I live through you, brother. Dakota says, been killing it this offseason, guys. Big Sills, too. Sorry I haven't been on live much. This is our busy season in the asphalt world. Just know I'm watching the replays every day. Appreciate the Eagles content every day. Dakota, thank you, brother. Appreciate it, man. Great comment. And keep grinding over on the asphalt. Appreciate it, man. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll be right back here on Birds 365 in 3 minutes. Hit that like button, everybody.
Welcome to the Jet Setters,